It always comes to this. Hello there, guys. Back again to do another, well, I guess it's not a tattoo progress update. It's a bit of a different video this week. I actually don't have an appointment with Rick this week. So I've got some other stuff to talk about. I will be talking about tattoos because that's my lane and that's what this channel is about for the most part. But it used to be as much or maybe more at points about piercings, which brings me to my next point, the obvious elephant in the room, or in this case, I suppose, mustache in the room. Not too long ago, I'd say maybe a few weeks ago, I got my mustache custom-made piece in the mail from a guy named Dead J King. We've been working on this thing for a while now. It will have already showed up on Remy Reacts, but I should have some kind of dedicated video speaking a little bit about this, at least. There isn't a whole lot to say, but well, where do I start? It's a mustache, obviously. He and I were joking about making one of these for a while. Dead J King has made all kinds of silly jewelry for me over the years. He's made some Krampus plugs for me with a little tiny movie Krampus on them. He's made me several long septum spikes and tusks and things of that nature. He made me, I think, 5 or 6 different septum crescents. So those are like the big round ones. I'll show those off another time. And the goal was always to try and find a way to make this comfortable, like theoretically to a place where you can wear this like daily if you want to. And for me, it's really not even a matter of I will wear this daily. It's always a matter of, can you do these things? Can it be done? Much like my interest in tattoos has become, I've always been more interested in scientific or experimental things than the aesthetical things. You know, real body mod was, to me, what body mod was always about was, you know, pushing limits and not societal necessarily, but certainly your own, and kind of seeing what the limits of an anatomy could be, and you know, things of that nature. And if it ended up looking cool, that was more or less a byproduct of the genuine pursuit of, you know, learning your body and changing your body and, you know, developing things. You know, like increasing the size of my my piercings was always like my own kind of little side hustle. Like it was always kind of like I get to tweak little things about my body on my own time without anyone else's input, and I was incredibly self-sufficient in that. And since I've, for the most part, stopped stretching piercings, I guess I completely stopped stretching piercings. I can't even remember, maybe 3 or 4 years ago was the last time I stretched something. And I've even retired some. Fitness has kind of taken over for that spot in my life. I'm in a lot better shape than I was once, and you know, I'm continuing to climb that ladder now, and that has nothing to do for me with like how things look. Like it's not like I want to be ripped. I want to be a playboy or something. You know, like I never had this goal of like tattoos, piercings, fitness to be more attractive. That was never necessarily the game plan for me. I'm going to get into what I think about that in a minute, but for me it was always like leveling up in a video game, or you know, pushing your own limits, and you know, just enjoying the hobby that it was, you know. And you get a huge endorphin rush from, you know, stretching a new piercing to a new size, and you know, then the lifestyle of can you keep it that size? Once you get into bigger sizes, that becomes its own thrill. You know, it becomes like its own little project. Each one of these holes was something like that, especially when I had forward helix piercings that I was stretching, and they were some of the biggest that I've ever seen. And the thrill of stretching those, for example, and seeing, how far can you go with that. And same thing with my tragus piercings that I had. I used to have one over here as well, and I had so many different holes that I had stretched in this ear, and I had stretched nipple piercings at one point. I had stretched nostrils. My labret was more than twice the size, and so was my philtrum was twice the size. I got into this stuff just to kind of see how far I could take it. And it was never like, oh, well, that might not look good, I better not do that. It was always just like, enjoying the game. It was almost like playing a sport or something. You can take that how you like. That's not going to be for everyone. I never thought it should be. What's happened is a lot of people have gotten into this culture because they decided that the look of people pushing the limits and taking it too far and stuff like this became an attractive one to some amount of people. And then a lot of people got into it that were, into the more extreme stuff, maybe, or closer to the extreme stuff. And then more of those people kind of proliferate and then engage with society, and people find it's not that bad or that scary or that, hard to understand. And before long, more normal folks that weren't otherwise into body mod start flirting with it, and they start getting, more tame stuff or more aesthetically pleasing stuff. And it kind of took over the industry. What I see these days is tattoos and piercings done more as a pretty thing or an attractive thing, an aesthetic thing, like a fashion accessory. That's what it's mostly done for these days. That was not always the case. Whether or not you think I'm right on that or not, you can have your opinion on that, but that was not always the drive. In fact, some people would probably tell you they did it to go against that. They didn't want to be part of the body norm kind of attractive range or spectrum that society likes. And I'm not necessarily against the fact that that's happened. It just is a fact. For example, I'm going to bring up a guy I haven't talked about in a while here. Renezzy just did a video on me again, and this time it was less negative than his last one, and more kind of just what do you think. And Renezzy casts a big shadow these days. He wasn't so big when I first met him. He had a smaller Instagram page than I did, and his YouTube was much smaller when we first interacted, as was mine. But with that said, he has an audience full of a lot of people who are into this thing for aesthetic purposes these days, as opposed to the thrill of liking body mod and pushing limits and things like this. Now you're interacting with a large group of people, which contains a lot of people who don't understand things like this, for example. I'm leaving this on to keep my point going throughout this video, in case it needed explaining. And so what I see is his audience's reaction to me once upon a time, 5-6 years ago, when we first started interacting, though it is Spanish-speaking people, this goes for English-speaking people as well. Most of them were fairly in support of the heavy body mod stuff, whereas now he has a much larger audience, and not to mention the fact that more people dislike Renezzy himself these days. But with that said, his much larger audience is full of much more, we'll say, pedestrian taste. And so when a guy like I show up, most of them haven't encountered me, whereas the first time that he featured me, most of them already knew who I was and had been demanding him to make a video on me for months, if not years. The story of a guy with a nice bodysuit blacking all of it out was a very trending, viral kind of post, so he had a natural pull to do a video on me for a long time. Whereas these days, I would say where his clout has grown and his following has grown, probably 85% of his followers weren't there in the beginning, and 5 to 10% of those followers have probably dropped off as his content has changed to suit a more palatable, pedestrian, more mainstream audience. So when you cover a guy like Remy, who does things because he likes body mod and not because he wants pretty roses on his neck, whether you like roses or not. These things could be fucking yellow or purple or green, or they could be boulders, for fuck's sakes. I think roses look nice, but that's not why they're there. I don't get these things for that reason anymore. I've had enough pretty pictures over the years that the pictures themselves no longer so much matter. It's purely and strictly, love of the game and experimentation and pushing the envelope myself, seeing what more I can do. And whereas I've given up that love for piercings and transitioned it somewhere with fitness, I'm still firmly enjoying the road with tattoos. And I think it's because there's so much more we can do with it. And that's been the whole inspiration for all of this stuff. The reason why these white and black on black roses became purple, red, and multiple colors of blue, and why now I have black shading around these roses to further bolden them. Whether they look nice or not, you have to understand at a certain point that maybe it's addiction. Sure, call it addiction, but you also have to understand that it's not addiction to beauty. It's addiction to some kind of progress in a direction. Because of what's been observed on my arm, for example, whenever I get to working on my legs, if I were to say start a leg sleeve, well, I have a larger knowledge base for what's achievable. When we first did this moon way back in the day, it's been nearly 4 years since we did this moon, and it was just packed white, well, actually shaded white, and it was like, straight white on black, which shouldn't have been a surprise that it worked because I had done things like that in the past. It's just that there's this stigma around covering black work, covering blackout tattoos. Whereas we cover black and cover-ups every day, there's a stigma around covering blackout tattoos for some reason, like that it can't work because maybe it's a huge body of black. I don't know if it's the case that you just increase the amount of black and it should increase the amount of impossible that it is to saturate. Whatever the case, whatever the reason for that opinion, none of it was true. And as I learned more and more about what wasn't true, it's like, well, naturally you start assuming that none of it was and that anything is game. And that's been the case. I don't know where that ends, right? I legitimately don't know where that ends. And that's why it would be silly for me to sit here and tell people that I had an end game or an end point for this project because I thought I was going to be done after my first bodysuit, but there were further limits to push. I then maybe thought I was going to be done at some point after my blackout suit. I never said I was done at blackout, but I did say whatever I did over the blackout would most likely be minimal. You can find that and quote me on it. I didn't expect to go as far as I have, and so I would imagine that that will always be the case. And that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. We should always be going farther than we expect. There should always be more room to grow in a direction. There should always be new avenues to explore, and I feel like because we have decided to look at tattoos in somewhat of a linear fashion, that's why you have people still wanting to achieve new. They still want to do new tattoos. So they start doing joke tattoos and things that will change their living experience. Like, for example, getting your barcode or your phone's whatever code, QR code tattooed on your forehead, or tattooing a beard on your face, or having a girl's footprint tattooed on the back of your head. Believe it or not, I've seen that. You have people doing things like that because we feel as though sometimes as humans, and this is why these things happen. It does not matter if people disagree. We feel as though as humans in general, not just with art, that we always should be doing something new and something further, whether we're aware of it or not. So because we don't have a meaningful direction to head in for that, that translates into different things. It translates into different art forms and games and sports and different ways. And some of those will come across more or less extreme. But those are all coming from that same New Frontiers mindset. And I think it's in line with my thoughts on, Western society, and for the most part, the greater world in general is, in some form of fall of Rome stage where there probably are new avenues for us to conquer, but we just don't know where they are, so we're just making a mess of ourselves. And you could argue that I've done the same. And I wouldn't even have a hard time agreeing with you. It just is what it is. And it's manifesting in all kinds of ways. You see it everywhere. The only thing that I would say is that make sure that your version of that is meaningful to you and not imposed on you by others in society, because this is a strictly personal endeavor. This mustache doesn't happen unless I want it to, This mustache was actually a lot of work to figure out. To talk a little more about it, we had to make sure that the width in the inside of it was not so thick that it busts my nostrils, because the main challenge of this is getting the slope right so that it sits evenly in my nose. We figured out breathing holes a long time ago. It's part of how I can wear this all day if I want without much discomfort. I could theoretically sleep with this thing in, and it would cause me no real discomfort, save for the fact that I'm a side sleeper and it would be pretty problematic to lay on. With that all said, it's been a genuine pursuit for me. There's been no pull from anyone else, and that's why I think it's such a strange thing for a broad audience to encounter, because it's not going in the direction that most people are. This is not the direction necessarily, though everyone is doing a version of their own thing, or at least anyone that's, interested in pushing is doing something similar to this. It just manifests differently. I am not necessarily going in the direction that most of the herd is going in with that same kind of push. I don't consult with my audience before I do anything. In fact, I probably do things in resent of what the greater audience wants. And so it puts me at odds with especially someone else's audience, but at times even my own, At the time of making this video, none of this rose sleeve is aired on my YouTube. Not any part of it. Not the roses themselves, not the black, not the thorns. The first video will be going up actually in a few days. And I have no idea what people are going to think about it. And I don't care, but I expect there to be opinions. Much like there would be opinions if I just wore this all the time. There will be opinions anyway, because some people will just click this video and they'll see the stupid mustache and they'll be like, what the fuck is he wearing? What a moron. Fair enough. Different strokes for different folks. Different mustaches for different folks. I can't grow a beard. This is my way of living, a little bit of that mustache life. Anyway, didn't have a session with Rick today. It's St. Paddy's Day, or was yesterday, so Rick's probably pretty drunk. And we planned ahead this time, so he didn't feel like disappointing me intentionally by not showing up or something, so that's just fine. I could use the day off anyway. I got all kinds of things to do. And but the session we did last time, I guess it's in here, healed up really, really well, and stayed at the same kind of level that I expected it to. And same thing, all of the work that Terry did, all this black shadowing, it all lightened up a bit, but not much. So it keeps the same effect overall, and I'm quite happy with it. The neck especially, it took really, really well with. So anyway, I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great day.